All right, ESPN star. That's the best way to put it. Stephen A. Smith rattled off a take about the Dogs and Alabama on First Take a couple days ago, talking about the college football season, getting prepped for it. He thinks that Alabama is the biggest threat to Georgia in this 2024 season. I think that's contrary to what the most popular belief has been, which has been that Texas is the biggest threat to Georgia, that Texas is kind of the two in the SEC this year, assuming that Georgia's not only the one in the country, but the one in the conference, right? So maybe that takes being weaned off a little bit. A couple injuries. I want to discuss Texas a little bit later in this video, but let's get to his take about Alabama. It's a big one, all right? And I want to break down a little bit of what he said. I got some counter arguments, and look, there is truth to what Stephen A. is saying here. This is what he said in an answer to who the biggest threat for Georgia is. Quotes for this: Alabama, the great Nick Saban is gone, but Kalen DeBoer is no scrub. A two-time national champion, came up short, didn't win, didn't have a three-peat. Why did they not have a three-peat? Because they ran into Alabama. Here's the deal right here. Kirby Smart, since the start of the 2020 season, what is Georgia's record against Alabama? 1-3, including 2 losses in the SEC title game. What is Kirby Smart's record lifetime against Alabama? 1-5. Relevant to the conversation, right? He's talking about how Kirby and Georgia have just really struggled against Alabama. I don't think that I'm beating a drum that we've been beating on the whole time by saying that. You watch the games. Bama's beaten Georgia almost every single time outside of that national championship a couple of seasons ago when Georgia finally ended that drought. Nick Saban's gone, Stephen A. Smith, and I think it's a little naive to say that notion is still the same thing, right? All right, I think that Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. I've been looking at the things he's done outside of Washington. His overall coaching record is, as a head coach, is 100 and something and 12. So this is a guy that wherever he goes, he wins, right? And he produces really good football teams, and that happened at Washington, where he helped lead them in 2 seasons at Washington. In the second season, he helped lead them to a national championship where they lose to Michigan. So Kalen DeBoer is a very good coach. And I think that there is potential there for him to be at Alabama for a long time and for him to succeed at Alabama. I wouldn't want to be the guy following up Nick Saban, right? I'd want to be maybe the next guy or maybe even the next guy after that. But they went out there and they got a guy that they think can help them succeed. Is that going to be the case against Georgia now the way it has been, right, in these Alabama and Georgia games? Listen, the biggest difference between Georgia and Alabama in these games has been Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, right? Because in a lot of these games, this 2021 SEC Championship, 2023 SEC Championship, 2 of those right there. All right, I think the 2018 SEC Championship, I think those teams were fairly even. 2020 regular season, Alabama definitely was the better team. 2017 national championship, who was actually the better team? Comes down the wire. And what happens? Alabama wins in all of the big moments in all of the games except for one of them. And I think that coaching has a lot to do with that. I think that you could see, and it's very public, that Kirby has made mistakes in a lot of these games. But the case is not that Alabama's just been a better football team. The case is they had the best coach in college football this entire time, and coaching against his protege in Kirby Smart. That's the biggest difference between Alabama and Georgia. That difference is gone. And now we're about to really find out, is Kirby Smart the next tyrant of college football that leads a dynasty? It feels like we're at the beginning of one. That's what it feels like. You can't really know where you are, right? We don't know if Georgia's best days are behind them or ahead of them or if we're right in the middle of them. We won't know that until after all this. But we do know that they're in the best days for the time being, and it looks like it's the start of something. And that start of something is going to be a lot easier if Kirby Smart is now labeled and rightfully is the best coach in college football. Is Alabama the biggest threat to Georgia in 2024? Right? That's a little bit more of the immediate question answer that Stephen A. Smith is getting to. I think the answer is probably maybe yes now, actually. If we're being honest, you look at Texas, and you know what? Ryan Killer from Dawg Post, make sure you're checking out the newsletter and looking at the offer we're giving you for Dawg Post right now, $1 until the Alabama game. We're talking about Alabama. You want to take advantage of being a premium subscriber for Dawg Post where you get Dean, Matt, and I, all of our insider stuff. It's on the website. Go check that out. It's in the link down below. Texas lost both its RB1 and its RB2 for the season. That hurts. All right, C.J. Baxter was projected to have a really good year. I have been on record saying, and I don't know the most recent time I said this, but I've been pretty much on record saying I think that Texas, it's a little overrated, right? Preseason AP poll comes out. Texas is 4, Oregon's 3. Wasn't 100% sure. I knew that they were going to be 3 and 4. They ended up putting Texas 4. Not that this matters end all be all, the AP poll, right? Especially the preseason one. But they did get the respect of being put ahead of Alabama and Ole Miss and some of the other SEC contenders. They put Texas at 4. The Georgia-Texas game, potentially the most watched college football game this season. It's going to be up there. It's going to be at least top 3, right? I'd imagine the top 3 are going to be Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia-Texas, and Georgia-Bama. Order it however you want. It's going to end up being those 3 as the 3 most watched college football games this season. Texas has a lot of turnover. They lost their defensive stars. I know that they replenished a little bit of that. They lost 2 weapons to the NFL. They replaced it with Isaiah Bond and some other guys, but and I know Quinn Ewers, like Carson Beck, and maybe, don't be hypocritical, Ryan. Carson Beck has to replace his 2 best weapons. Georgia has more that they've been building up than Texas has, and they added a lot in the transfer portal that I think is going to help. Texas did do some of that, but not to the level that Georgia did, and now they're losing their 2 best weapons out of the backfield. I think things just got a little bit harder for Texas, a team that I think is being slightly overrated, just because I don't know that the offense is going to be quite as good as it was a year ago when they had legitimate NFL guys kind of all over the place, right? Jonathan Brooks as well. Who's that starting running back? Is Texas ready for the turnover yet? We haven't seen that, right? We've seen Georgia do that. We've seen Alabama do that. Is Texas ready to start turning it over, right? Usually it's not as easy at the beginning of a reign. Not that Texas is reigning right now over the rest of college football, but I do think that you can now make the argument, probably Alabama. If I'm agreeing with Stephen A. Smith, and I think Alabama's Georgia's biggest threat in 2024, and let's just stick to SEC teams for now. There's a mental aspect of going to Tuscaloosa and playing Alabama. Now, I think that part of that mental aspect is over. Part of it. Right? They beat Alabama a couple years ago, and now Nick Saban is gone. But it is something that the team has struggled with, right? Like we said it. I thought that most people, it's pretty on record for most people, thought that Georgia was a better football team than Alabama in 2023. What happens? They go and they lose by 3 points, and it's a little bit more than that in the rightful score. Right? Georgia kind of coming back there at the end of the game. Well, does it change? Does it change now? I think it does change a little bit, right? Kalen DeBoer's a really good coach. I think that Alabama's going to be good. I don't see this team losing more than a couple games. So I think that that's kind of their floor, right? Maybe 10-2 in the regular season is kind of the floor of Alabama, and I do think they are probably Georgia's biggest threat if Texas is maybe not quite as good as the general public thinks it is. I still think Georgia's the best team in college football, and even if Alabama is the biggest threat, they're not the threat that Stephen A. Smith was saying in that video, right? The commonality with Kalen DeBoer and these teams is it's an air raid offense. And he said back in March, maybe February, on the SEC Network, on ESPN, he told reporters, we're going to run the air raid. So if that's the case, they do not have the personnel that they had in Washington. Michael Penix Jr. is a bona fide NFL quarterback with an NFL arm, and he was throwing to NFL receivers in Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan. Those guys are all going to be in the NFL for at least a few years and projected to be starters kind of from day one. And Michael Penix Jr., whatever his situation is with the Falcons, is a guy that a lot of people think is going to eventually take over there. That was an NFL air raid personnel. The personnel's different with Jalen Milroe. You have another good offensive line, right? You go to Alabama, where Washington had a great offensive line. They win that award, the Joe Moore Award. You go to Alabama. It's going to be different. I don't think that you could just run their style of offense with Jalen Milroe. If Kalen DeBoer can adapt and can help advance Jalen Milroe in his game, yeah, Alabama's offense is going to be kind of scary no matter who the weapons are on the outside. They've got really good running backs. They've got one of the best running back rooms in college football. You can say the same thing about Georgia, but when you think about Jam Miller and you think about Justice Haynes and those guys, yeah, it's a pretty stacked running back room for Alabama, but this personnel is different. I don't like first-year head coaches to go on and win a national championship or to go on and be extremely competitive. Kirby couldn't do it. Right? Maybe he's not going into as great of a situation as he was as Kalen DeBoer is with Alabama. I don't know. That's apples to oranges. Brian Kelly didn't do it with LSU, right? There's tons of examples. It's hard to do it in year one. And so I do think there are counter arguments to how big the threat actually is. But yes, it's not a dumb argument on Stephen A. Smith's part that Alabama is the biggest threat in college football to Georgia, more so the SEC. You look around the country, I think Oregon's a really good team. I think Ohio State obviously is on par with Georgia in terms of talent on their roster. It's just a matter of they're going to put it together. Alabama's not just going away, but to expect them to be the exact same threat to Georgia as they were, to me, is a little naive. Thanks for watching.